is something that, although you can prepare for as best as possible, the biggest learning curves, the biggest points of learning that you are going to have is going to be on the ground. Lawrence, I know that you've definitely got some great experience in terms of teaching, as it were, but you may well be in for a whole new treat when you head over to China. So hopefully we'll be able to go through a few bits and pieces to help you out and help you best prepare for what life's going to be like once you get there. So I've got a little presentation that we can run through today as well. Hopefully my screen sharing and my microphone won't mute for the whole time again, but you never know. Let's see how we get on. We're in the new normal anyway. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be going over, first of all, a few introductions and a little icebreaker between all of us. We've not got too many in the group today. So I think I'm just going to split us into two little groups just to do a couple of icebreaker activities, just so we can get to know one another and find out a little bit more about each other. Then we'll speak about starting out at your school. Now, I'm going to forego a little bit of the history of Chinese education and more of the kind of overviews of it, as we did do our session on that a few weeks ago, which I sent out the emails to with the links on. So hopefully you guys have all seen that. What we're going to be focusing on much more today is actually the practical application of what we need to do in classes in China, what to expect when you're there. And I'll be going through some of my personal public school teaching experience over there as well, which hopefully you may be able to glean some wisdom from, if you're lucky, or if I'm lucky enough to be able to pass that on. We'll then be talking a bit about expectations in the classroom. And, you know, this is going to be really important when it comes to the expectation and sort of like the concerns that you might have before you go as to what's going to be expected of you. We'll go on to the most common challenges that you can expect, and I'll give you a few examples in there. And now we'll be speaking more about what to expect outside of the classes, before finishing off on going a bit more in depth and chatting a bit more about the public school locations, which you guys are going to be going to as well. What I want to do and make sure of most of all in this session is going to be interactivity. So with us having a small group, I'm going to be able to, you know, field questions to things. I'm going to try and take some gaps after after every couple of slides. So you guys can just unmute yourselves and ask anything if you have any questions. And at the end of each section as well, we're going to be allowing some time for discussion and feedback too. So hopefully we can make this as interactive as we possibly can. I know that, you know, sitting in front of Zoom for 3 hours is, yeah, tiring. So we'll try and keep it as discursive as we possibly can. First of all, what I'd like you guys to do just for a couple of minutes would be if you could fill out this contact information form for me. I'm just going to pop the link in here. So I'll just give you guys a couple of minutes just to fill this out. So I'm just going to quickly pop the link in the chat that we have. Where's our chat? Here it is. So if you guys can fill this out for me. And what we'll be able to do with that is then we'll be able to get a little bit of a better idea of contact information, and with your permission, if you fill this out, we can share it with all the other teachers who are going to the school you're going to and the city you're going to, so you can catch up on WeChat and email each other as well. We will be doing coordination between you guys as well, but we tend to find actually it works a hell of a lot better when you guys have the freedom to communicate with yourselves without anyone sort of leering over your shoulder or telling you what to do. So if you guys want to just take 2 minutes just to fill that out, that'd be great.
Is anyone getting the message that says they need permission and we need the owner's permission?
Okie dokie. 1 second. That'll be why I had a problem with it last time as well. 1 moment. Let me just quickly change those settings. Sorry about that. 1 sec. Okay, I think this one should work for you. There we go. Let me know if that doesn't work as well. No.
No.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm being really slow today. Now this one should definitely work. Cool. Oh, sorry, Ben. Sorry, 1 second. That's the editing one. That's me being very slow once again. Sorry, I'm having a having a nightmare.
It looked a bit like that after I filled my name in.
Yeah, no, sorry, that's my bad once again. Let me just try one more thing. For some reason, it seems to be blocking me sharing this with everyone. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send this out afterwards. That'll be a bit easier. I'll get this sorted and send it out afterwards. Let's crack on then and just go on to our icebreaker. If what I'll do is I'll just quickly pop you guys into a couple of breakout rooms, and we're just going to do a short little icebreaker where if I just get you guys to give a brief introduction to yourself, just let us know your name, where you've studied, what you studied, and then tell your group the most exciting thing you've ever done. The most exciting thing you've ever done. Now, when it comes to sharing information like this is quite useful for when you're in a public school, because you'll sometimes rely, especially if you're with kind of middle school students or older primary school students, on they love to hear stories or love to see any holidays and things you've been on as well. So it's quite a handy little thing to do. What I'm just going to quickly do now is just quickly pop you guys into some breakout rooms. One moment. Okay. There we go.
Could just be a bit awkward, I suppose.
Hey guys. They're struggling to join the room as well. Sorry. Cool. So, sorry, George, were you just going ahead?
No. I can do, but if you
Yeah,
want
let's kick off.
My name's George. I am 23 years old. I come from a town just outside of Liverpool. I went to Sheffield Hallam University and I studied sociology, and now I'm doing a master's at the University of Sheffield, at which I'm just finishing now. And the most exciting thing I've ever done, it's always a tricky one. I'd say probably like I went and worked out in America last summer at like a summer camp. So like, yeah, that's quite like unique. Not a lot of people have done that. So yeah.
Sweet. Whereabouts did you go?
I was in California. I was about like an hour and a half away from Los Angeles. So yeah, it was pretty cool. And then
Nice.
I traveled around America when I finished and that. So yeah, it was nice.
that sort of Camp America kind of thing, or
Yeah, yeah. So like we had it's quite good though because we had a lot of like Chinese kids like at my camp, so like I kind of like learned a few things with them and that. But yeah, it was all right.
fantastic, fantastic, awesome, cool. Ben?
Yeah. Hi. So my name's Benjamin. I'm from Aberdeenshire, up in Scotland, and I've just finished studying electrical engineering at Aberdeen. And the most exciting thing I've done, I suppose, is similar to George, and it's travel related. But last year, I managed to get an internship to an IT company in India. So for 8 weeks, we went over and worked in this Indian company. And in all the weekends, we went out traveling and seeing the different sites all across the country and stuff. And so that's probably the most exciting thing I'm able to say.
That's fantastic. That's really cool. Hello, Kaylee. Hi. We are just doing a quick little icebreaker session. Feel free to pop your camera on if you can. Hello. Oh, I think you're muted. One sec.
Hi.
Let's get you
Can you hear me
unmuted.
now?
I can hear you now. That's
Hi.
perfect.
Perfect. How's it going?
Very good, thank you. Very good, Kaylee. We're just doing a little icebreaker where we're just introducing ourselves, a little bit about us, what we've studied, where we're at in our lives at the moment, and the most exciting thing you've ever done.
Wow. Okay. So I'm located in Texas right now. I just graduated with my bachelor's of psychology. And the most exciting thing I've done, that's really tough. I feel like I do a lot of exciting things, but now that I'm put on the spot, I'm not sure I can come up with something very exciting.
Very cruel. It's very cruel, I know.
I know. I feel like I'm like, okay. The most exciting thing, truthfully, was probably when I went to Hong Kong. I thought that was like, I had never left the country before, so it was like really foreign to me. But it was also like really interesting and like really cool. And that was probably the coolest thing. That's probably why I'm actually going back to China.
Fantastic. When did you go to Hong Kong?
I went last year in like May. I did a study abroad program for about 2 months-ish. So it was pretty cool.
Fantastic. What university did you do it at?
West Texas A&M. So it's a branch of Texas A&M. So it's
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Really
and what university? Sorry, what university did you go to in Hong Kong? Where did you do your course there?
Hong Kong University.
Nice.
Sorry,
that's always the best one to remember. Yeah.
Yes. I always want to say like something state because that's how it is in the States here. But I was like, what is it? Okay.
Awesome. Fantastic. I think Hannah's got some problems just with her microphone, so I'm not too sure if we can work with her. I'll just give you a quick little icebreaker for myself. My name's Will. You probably heard a fair bit of me, but I studied, like Ben, at the University of Aberdeen many years ago. I studied, and after I graduated, I went to go and live and work in China for 8 years. And that's without any, well, not for 8 years, not live in China for 8 years, but work with China for 8 years after teaching for several years. That is without a doubt the most exciting thing I've ever done, remains the most exciting thing I've ever done. Hopefully will be the most exciting thing you guys have done as well. But let's pop out of our break rooms just now. So if we just close these off, give everyone a little bit of time, and we can shoot back on. Hi guys. Can you all hear me okay? Fantastic. I think that's everyone back now. Brilliant. Okie dokie. Let's crack on then. So, starting out at a public school in China. Where to begin? Well, first of all, there's the introduction to your school itself. And when you start out in China, there are going to be several points that you are going to remember, not just during your time in China, but for the rest of your life during your first week. And these are going to mostly fall under a pretty broad category of being introduced to your school in China. Schools in China, for those of you who haven't been inside one yet, are very, very large. Those of you who are in the UK may be taken aback just by how large these schools are, particularly primary schools in comparison to the UK. Whereas in the UK, you can have primary schools that average around 400 or 500 students. In China, it's not uncommon to get towards 2,000 within primary schools themselves, and they are significantly larger than secondary schools that you would find in the UK, and can at first seem relatively intimidating. The layout of the schools themselves as well are quite interesting. They're very functional. Most schools in China will be laid out by year group. Every story of the school will house a different year group. And most classes will stay within their own classroom throughout most of the time that you teach. The teachers tend to move class in China as opposed to the students, which is something to get used to as well. And seeing all of this for the first time really does stick with you and can feel a tiny little bit intimidating when you first arrive. The second thing that you're going to notice when you're starting out is going to be meeting other teachers and also the head teacher whilst you're there. We'll be chatting a little bit more about that as we proceed, and the importance of authority and hierarchy and all of these bits and pieces that go nicely with Chinese culture. We'll be chatting as well about staff rooms, the meeting culture that exists in China, which is something to be very aware of as well. You're going to find yourself involved in quite a few meetings whilst you are there, which is certainly something to be aware of and to keep track of when it comes to things like cultural importance and cross-cultural understanding, and as part of that professionalism and hierarchy that exists. And of course, we'll be talking about meeting your class for the first time, what to expect, what you're going to be doing, and how that can work. What I really want to do as part of all of this is give you some quick fire tips on how to best control your class for the first time when you arrive, on how to best feel confident in front of your class when you first arrive. And really, hopefully, what I hope you guys can get from this session is you are going to be given training when you arrive there. But I hope as well you'll have a few points that will stick in your head and you'll remember, oh, I remember I need to do this or I need to do that when I first arrived in a classroom in China. First of all, I think it'd be really good to have a little look at some of our teachers who went out in 2019 to teach in public schools in China, and just take a look at a couple of video experiences from their first impressions when they first arrived in China as part of the Teach China graduate program to teach out there. There we go.
Hey guys, Storm here and welcome to Adventures with Storm. My name is Storm and I'm going to tell you literally about my experience and my first week at my school. So, a little bit about the deets. I work at a primary school which is very, very interesting. So, I work with grade 1 to 3 and this group of kids, very, very energetic. I realized that when I first walked into that classroom, if my energy is 0, I am getting absolutely nothing from these kids. I need to keep them engaged. And that's the first thing I learned. That's the first thing I realized when I walked into this class, is that my energy has to be so powerful that they can't be distracted with anything else. My energy has to be the sole focus. My energy has to even be higher than theirs at some points. And that's really what I realized when I first entered the classroom during my first week, is that my energy always has to be on point, which means bed before 10, literally. The second thing I realized is that there are 50 kids to a class, and that essentially means that my lessons have to be interactive, they have to be very engaging, they have to be very interesting, despite the fact that I am teaching phonics, something that really isn't that interesting if we're going to be honest. I have to make sure that however I'm communicating to them, they want to actually learn it and they can actually maintain focus. That is so important. I realized that structure is so key to the classroom, especially with younger kids, because I am laying the foundations of their language learning. I'm laying the foundations of their English. And if that is the case, I need to make sure that everything that they learn at this stage is strong enough so that they can take it into their grade 2, grade 3 or grade 4 classes next year, so that they can continually improve and build on the foundations that I have built. One of the interesting things about my first week was that many of the kids had never seen someone that looked like me before. Truth be told, I mean, we can't deny it, the facts are the facts. I mean, my skin, I am a black woman, I am 21 years old, I've just come out of university, and they have never seen anyone that looks like me. And so I realized that this was a really, really good opportunity to shed some positive light on my culture, who I am. I may be the only black person they ever see. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And so even though they didn't fully understand why I looked different, I wanted to make sure that what I put across was just positive, and that whatever they saw in me, that they would carry that on for the rest of their lives. When I am feeling nervous, when I am feeling a little bit like, oh, what am I gonna do? I literally just have to remember, Storm, like, you can actually do this. You got through university, you know, you've done so many things. You know, there's something about speaking over yourself. I realized in that first week, I cannot be saying, I can't do this. I can't, oh my gosh, it's too much. It's too much. No. No, you're going to step in that classroom and you're going to do what you need to do. Why? Because they need to learn. Do you know what I'm saying? I have no worries. I have no worries, honestly. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then I really hope to see you here soon. I mean, you're missing out on a lot. The sun shines, you know, pretty much all the time, and if it's not shining, it's definitely hot. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you here, and I will talk to you soon. My name is Storm, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.
So that's Storm. For reference, for you guys, the place where that sun is shining all the time is actually Shenzhen, for those of you who are going to be going to Shenzhen to teach. Storm's finished off this year, so she's not there anymore. She's actually going into teaching in the UK, in London now. When Storm went out, I met Storm at the University of Hertfordshire, about, well, nearly 2 years ago now. And she was studying business. And she was incredibly energetic and lively and bubbly. But the biggest thing that she always tells me, and that she said in that video as well, is just how ready you've got to be for the energy of some of those kids, especially grade 1 to 3. And even someone with that kind of personality, it's really, really strongly expected. We also have another teacher, Tommy, who's a little bit of a different kind of personality. And these are his first thoughts when he arrived for teaching in China. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so I recorded all this a minute ago and I just went to edit it and I realised it's all out of focus. So here we go, part 2, let's try again. So as you can tell, I'm not actually in the hotel anymore. I've moved into my apartment. I've been here for like a week, but I'll talk about that in the next video. As you already know, this video is going to be about my school life and the process of joining the school and what I teach and everything like that. So I'll start with my first day. My first day, I was met by my recruiter, person from the company, at a metro stop. It's like 10 minutes away from my school. My school is located in the Milian district in Futian, well, Milian like area in the Futian district, which is like north of Futian. It's a good location, to be fair. It's quite quiet around there. My school is actually made up of primary school and middle school, so I teach grade 7, which is middle school, I think grade 6 is the start of middle school. I also been covering grade 5 recently, which is like the top of primary school. So grade 7 are like 11, 12, 13, something around that age. They're pretty cool, to be fair. Like, they can fully understand what you're saying, so it's easy to give instructions, because personally I haven't taught before. So I found it's easier with the older kids because they know what you're saying. So you can set tasks, you can like explain things a lot easier, and they sort of like can understand it. Whereas with the grade 5s, it's a bit more difficult. You have to make things a bit more like fun. So like you have to like explain things all like this, and like you play games and be a bit more energetic. Whereas like the grade 7s, they're cool. You can just fully chat to them and things like that. So grade 7 is what I teach, and I'm also going to be teaching grade 6 in the next week. I start my grade 6 classes. So I'll have I think I'm going to have about 13 classes a week, which is not too bad. They're like 40 minutes long, and you do your lesson plans the week before, and you teach the same lesson to the same grade for like every single class that week for the week after. So you only have to do so I'll have to do 2 lesson plans a week. So one for grade 7 and one for grade 6. So it makes sense. In terms of the school, that actually one thing I didn't realise before I came, which I realised on like my first or second day, there's actually a 2-hour break in between lessons. So from like, you have lunch maybe at like 11:30, and then from 12 until like 2 o'clock, you're allowed to just like sort of do what you want. Sounds weird, I know, yeah, I was a bit like, what? But you can sleep and things like that. So kids, if they live close, they can go home. But if they live quite far away, then they're allowed to sleep in the classrooms. Kids bring like eye masks and pillows and things like that, and they sort of like sleep in classrooms, or you can just sort of chill out. For me, my first week, I was sort of doing the time to plan lessons, but now I think I'm in my second week, I've just been sleeping, like honestly, like half an hour naps every day, because as soon as there's this one bloke who sits in my office, as soon as he gets up and turns the light off, I know it's time to go sleep. Like, there's no way you can't go sleep. I've just got my headphones in, and I'm just sitting there like trying to fight it, but I'm just nodding off. So like, that's the cue. That's my cue to go sleep. As soon as he gets up and turns the light off, I'm like, right, it's time to sleep. What else? Free school meals. So you get breakfast and lunch, both free. I haven't been for breakfast yet because I live like half an hour away, so like it's a bit early to get up. So I just get something on the way. It's basically, the lunch is laid out as like a buffet, and you get like a plate of rice, and you pick what you want, made up of like vegetables, fruits, and meat and things like that. So literally, and soup, they love soup, so you can get what you want from there, and then you can get like a little yogurt. I think that might be everything. If not, then I'm sorry because I missed something, but yeah. So I think my next video is going to be on my tour of my apartment, setting all that up. And I'll talk about like Taobao, this app where you can just order anything you want, literally. How much I pay and all my expenses and things like that. So hopefully I can see you then, and thank you for watching.
So Tommy and Storm, both teachers who did vlogs for us. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can find their full lists as well. They're both public school teachers in Shenzhen. So their life and their journey is probably going to be quite valuable for all you guys who are here, actually, to be able to get a little bit of a glimpse into sort of what to expect whilst you're there in normal times. Now, of course, Tommy raised a few quite interesting points in there that actually may be quite useful just to quickly pick up on in terms of the day-to-day culture that exists at public schools in China. The majority of you are not really going to have any strict office hours to keep. Your teaching hours are going to be the most important. You'll have relative flexibility outside of that to kind of do as you please, but very often you'll find yourself staying at school, doing your work preparation, doing your lesson prep. The schools do have a 2-hour lunch, like you said, and this can be something that's very, very different for a lot of us. And nap and snoozing culture in China is massive. If you want to stay behind in the offices at lunchtime, I really heavily, you might be thinking like, oh, I've never have a nap in the afternoon. That seems like a weird thing to do. When you have your first week of teaching the young, wild Chinese kids, you'll quickly realize why that nap does exist in the early afternoon. So it's quite a good idea to bring a pillow with you to school sometimes. You can keep it in the staff room, which is quite useful. But when you first arrive in China, there is the really obvious big thing that you've got to know, which is energy. You've got to have energy for your working week at a public school in China. There are people I know who work in the private school and private language centre roles who can get away with going by on 5 or 6 hours sleep at night. You want to get your 8 hours working in a public school because you're going to be dealing not with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even 20 to 30 kids. You're going to be dealing with between 40 to 60 kids in each of your classes. And these kids can sometimes be noisy, and these kids can sometimes get a little bit unruly, but we'll talk more about that in a second. All classrooms in China, particularly in the modern first and second tier cities where we send teachers, are fully equipped and modernized with smart boards, PA systems and microphones that you're able to use for your classes. One of my favorite things about teaching public school classes in China is you can feel like a TED talker with your little microphone in the top, encouraging them all and being the big boss. You've got to prepare yourself, though, when you're doing your classes in China because of these large numbers. Of course, having energy and enthusiasm is the starting point of it. But being prepared is the foundation upon which that is built. So you've got to ensure that you have your lessons prepared. With this, it's important to note that the vast majority of you will be working in a system where your classes are essentially going to be a kind of additional class to their English classes they do with the Chinese teachers. So your class is pretty much going to be a review of their English classes that they've done with the Chinese classes teachers before. So going and watching these lessons is really important, and asking other English teachers, Chinese English teachers, if you can go into their classes to watch their lessons when you're not working for your first couple of weeks is really important as well, because you won't necessarily always be prompted into doing this. Now, when you arrive, you are going to receive full training and full lesson planning preparation for this. But what they might not necessarily tell you is how to interact with the teachers that are going to be around you and use them as a resource. Because learning how these teachers have taught their kids can be very useful for you. I'll give you an example of this. There are times where students may be mistaught in China, where their English teacher might teach them an incorrect pronunciation of a word within a lesson. Their impulse will be to treat what their Chinese teacher, because they have them more often and feel more authoritative, as being correct, as opposed to what you're teaching them. So you may find instances where students will get a piece of grammar or a word wrong. This is a really good opportunity for you to help out other staff as well, by going through lessons with them, watching their lessons, and maybe saying, when you said this is actually pronounced this way, or actually this bit of grammar is just slightly off. So that way what you can do is you can then correct these little mistakes in lessons as well, and also help the teachers out too. Of course, again, we go back to our kind of cultural lessons where we were talking about how we bring things up like this. Do it in private, do it in a super friendly and super helpful way. But these are really nice ways in which you can really involve yourself in school life, really begin to get on with your client, with the teachers who you're working with, and actually start to make a difference beyond your remit. Now, one really important thing as well is having your classroom rules laid out at the beginning of each lesson. So this is something that is super important to prepare. So when you're thinking about your classroom rules, what should you think about? We want, first of all, our students to be drilled, our students to be concentrating on what you're saying, but we kind of also really want our students to be speaking and talking to each other in English. So making rules such as no talking when the teacher is talking, making rules such as come in, sit down, books out, making rules such as English only, making rules such as talk when a teacher tells you. Very simple, very short little rules that you will introduce in your first lesson with the classes, you know, coming down, not necessarily hard, full of energy, but friendly enough, but firm with your rules at the start, and then going over at the beginning of every lesson. And I mean every lesson. And what you can do as well is you can get your students to repeat the rules back to you after the first couple of weeks or even first couple of days. Chinese students are used to learning by rote. And they're used to having this structure that's given to them. So when you come in, you can say to them, what are the rules? Rule 1, no Chinese or English only. It's the most wonderful thing hearing 60 voices cry that back to you in unison. So having these rules laid out and having these drills and commands laid out is something that's very important. I'll go into a little more detail on that in just a second. In terms of the structure of each day at a public school in China, it really depends on where you are. But for most cases, school usually begin around 7:40 to 8 a.m. This is when students are going to come in and going to be arriving at the school. Every Monday, there'll be a flag raising ceremony at the beginning of the day, and the students will sing the national anthem. This is a really interesting bit of China that the private school teachers won't get, but you will. Everyone will file out into the playground or into the grounds of the school. They'll raise up the flag, and everyone will sing the Chinese national anthem. If you really want to ingratiate yourself at the school, learn the Chinese national anthem and sing it every Monday. It's quite a fun national anthem. I think it's quite a good one. It is. Remember, when you're singing the national anthem, though, you gotta treat it nice and seriously and sort of look up and be respectful. As it is a criminal offence not to. But no, don't worry, you'll be fine. But it is a really important part of the day every Monday. On a lot of other days as well, they'll actually have exercise outside as well. So depending on your school, every other day or even every day, the whole school will go out into the training grounds and they'll do exercises where might do star jumps, they might do running around, they might do stretches, and teachers and staff will often be involved in this as well. This is to foster a sense of community among absolutely everyone involved within it, and also prepare you for the day ahead, limber you up, get you ready for feeling energized for the school day ahead. School will usually finish around 5 p.m. for students. You'll likely finish much earlier than this when your lessons finish. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of your lessons are going to be, a lot of your hours are going to be dependent more on your teaching hours as opposed to office hours, which you rarely have. Some schools finish lessons before 5 p.m. and have cram lessons and extracurricular activities that are placed within it. Volunteering to help with things like drama clubs, dance clubs, things like that is really, really good to do with these extracurricular activities. Many schools that you're going to be working at in first and second tier cities will have quite exotic extracurricular activities as well that you can engage with that are really interesting. Things like coding, robot making, I've seen in many schools, traditional Chinese dancing, traditional Chinese orchestra, all sorts of really interesting things that you'll find in these first and second tier cities as extracurricular activities that, if you ask nicely, you can become involved in and help out with, and students will be really happy to do. Make sure you do that, because these are the kind of cultural things that will really broaden your horizons. There are also cram sessions that students will do as well in this, where they'll be learning more of their kind of regular subjects. Attendance at cram sessions, although it's optional, is usually 100%, especially towards exam time. So you might find that normal lessons finish, but actually pretty much the whole school stays behind for extracurricular activities. Most foreign teachers teach between 15 and 20 lessons per week, and lessons of 40 minutes each. So you'll have between 15 to 20 40-minute sessions per week. Some of you that are in particular schools will actually have less than that. Some of you will have 10, some of you will have even less than that as well. When it comes to the workload that you have in public schools, you definitely have a better workload than in private language centres, where you can have up to 30 lessons per week at times. You will rarely have over 15, to be completely honest with you, in the vast majority of schools. So doing extracurricular activities and involving yourself in things like this is actually a really important thing outside of your lessons as well, and something that can give you something rewarding to do. Some schools can be open as late as 9 p.m. This is generally middle and high schools, and it's when students are getting ready to do their 2 big exams in China, the Zhongkao in middle school, which decides on the high school you go to, and the big bad Gaokao in high schools, which is essentially the most important and most stressful exam in the entire world that any student can ever sit. That Chinese students will take when they're 18 years old, which will decide their university entrance and which university they'll be going to, or if they can go to university itself as well. So with all of these stresses, all of these strains, all of this activity going on, it's important to remember to remain focused on your core job. Yes, involve yourself in all of these things as much as you can, but make sure that your lessons are arranged and planned very well. Now, the best way to do this is to divide and conquer your classroom. You're going to have up to 60 kids in your class. Most of you will have between 40 and 50. Students in your class are generally arranged in single desks like this. Usually you have single desks that are pushed together, so you have sort of 2 abreast, and then you'll have little corridors that students can walk down to get across and through. The best way to divide your class is to divide them along those columns and divide them into teams that you'll clearly label A, B, and C. So your column will have, let's see if I can use a little drawing thing here. Yeah, there we go. So you split them down. So 1, 2, and on the other side, 3. And then you've got your A, B, C teams. And at the beginning of each lesson, they all know what team they're in. They all know what they're doing, and they all know that they need to compete. And on your whiteboard, it's very often a good idea to always have written A, B, I can do a B, and C. And in that, whenever students within each column answer a question correctly, when you ask them to put their hands up, you can give their team a star. So now what you have is you have a self-policing classroom, because these kids go wild for their stars. They go really wild for their stars. And the rows, when students are talking, if they talk a little bit too much, you can get rid of their star. Now, the students in their columns will become very irate and very irritated when a star is gotten rid of for their column, and will begin to police the behavior of their rows for you. So you no longer need to be sitting there shouting, "No, stop that! David, put that down! David, Daisy, stop pulling Ian's hair!" So you're going to very quickly realize that getting your children to police themselves is a lot better way than policing them yourself. With your students as well, they'll all have English names. Make sure they have their English names written on a piece of card on their desk. They should always have it, but make sure they take that out at the beginning of each lesson. Because of course, remembering 40 to 60 students' names can sometimes be hard. You will get to know them all, but particularly at the beginning, for the first few weeks and months, you'll need to remember them. And actually communicating with your students directly by their name, as opposed to saying, "Yes, you," as a lot of Chinese teachers do with their students, can really create a feeling of connectedness to your students in the class, which will really go well for you. So remembering to have a reward system, remembering to split them into columns, and remembering at the beginning of each lesson to have the rules that they need to obey for their class laid out as well. Now, what you're going to need to have as well as that is you're going to need to have call commands. So with call commands, you are going to want to use these short, snappy, rote-like commands to regain control of your class if and when it does slip. and also to make sure students order themselves at the beginning of each lesson. Remember, English is the second language to them, and the younger they are, the less they're going to understand initially, but the more they're going to soak in through their spongy little brains of what you teach them. So having call commands for students in these large classes and in China can be very, very useful for keeping control of your classes. Again, make sure you implement them straight away in your first lesson. Keep it simple and make it fun and memorable when you're doing it. Now, when you do your initial training, when you arrive, you're going to have all kinds of teachers who are going to teach you all kinds of different call commands that they use for their classes. And everyone always takes an idea and kind of makes it their own. So it's what works well for you, and there's a bit of trial and error involved in it. Now, my big one that I always used, that students quite like that were at a primary school age, was I used one which is called the Magic V, where I would stand in front of the class, make my body really big, stretch out my arms like this, so the whole of the class was in between my two hands. And I'd shout out to them, Magic V, and then they have to say, look at me, because the V shape goes towards my face. And I would teach them at the very beginning, when I say Magic V, arms crossed back up, and you say, look at me. And then you practice it with them again. I say Magic V, you say, look at me. And again, 60 kids suddenly going, look at me, is a really wonderful thing to see. And you are going to be surprised at how quickly and how effectively this works in a Chinese context with students at these schools. It's something that, again, is drilled a little bit into students at schools to have these kinds of rote signals that are done for it, and to have these call signs as well. Now, another one, if you are being is working up in terms of severity for these things. So say with a Magic V, that can be at any point. If you've just asked your groups to split off and do group work with each other, you can say, Magic V, look at me. It doesn't mean they're necessarily in trouble. It's just a way of you regaining control of 60 students in your class once they've been asked to go out and do a separate activity. You want to kind of have a range of severity in terms of what your call commands are going to be. The call command that I always like is a countdown from 5, where you just simply begin to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Never shout when you do it, but practice it for the first lesson and say with quite severity, when I say 1, everybody is quiet. Everybody looks at me. So when you're doing your Magic V, you can be quite fun with it because they sort of know, and it's a high energy engaged thing, but they know when you count down to 1 on your fingers with the countdown, that's when they're in trouble. That's when they're being noisy. And that's the point in which they are going to need to stop and refocus themselves on you. Again, with these call signs, keep them simple. I'll send out a list full of them that work well with Chinese students, because you can't complicate it too much. You can't go too much into an explanation. Any explanation that you do for this needs to be nice and simple, because these students are going to be quite young, and these are going to be some things that they're going to need to remember. So number 3, have your lesson structure down to a T when it comes to preparing. So you will have a rough kind of curriculum that you're going to be expected to teach, and it's going to be mirroring what the Chinese teachers are teaching as well. So like I said earlier, make sure you observe the Chinese teachers' English lessons, and make sure you take a look and study the books that you're given as well on the curriculum. There is quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how you teach this. Make sure that you speak with more experienced teachers to learn as much as you possibly can. And remember that structure is absolutely vital with younger learners. So having a solid beginning, end, and middle of your lesson of what you do is very important. Begin your lesson with a song in China with younger kids. Always begin it with a song, and give them an objective each week to learn and perfect a particular song. It's something that they enjoy, it's something that they engage with, and it's something that they can find quite fun to do. And end their lesson as well with a song or with another treat, maybe where you reward the row that did the best with the choice of a song that they get to choose to sing at the end of the class, or an activity that they get to do, or a game that they get to do at the end of the class as well. Because that way they know they've got something to look forward to. Always, always, always remember to review the previous lesson at the beginning of each lesson, or just after you do the song, go over what you did in the last lesson with them again. And always remember to try to work with them at their pace. Sometimes students in China can be a little rushed by their teachers or by the courses themselves. So make sure you keep an eye on the progress of students. Don't go too fast with them. If you need to move past something, move past it. If you feel students need to stay on a particular area and their Chinese English teacher is moving them on too quickly, have a chat with the Chinese English teacher and say, okay, is it okay if in our class this week we go back over this instead of going back over your last lesson? Try to bring as much control as you can to help the students go to a pace that works well for them. Because sometimes in China, they are going to be given a bigger pace than they can cope with. And remember, your sessions are for review and for helping with them. So don't feel too much pressure in pushing them forward really quickly, because that might fall on you. So let's take a look and maybe have a go at practicing some commands that we might want to use for students in China. Now, I reckon, I think, Lawrence, it might be good to bring you in here just a little bit with some of this. In your experience in the UK, have you used any commands, any sort of call signals that you find quite effective that you might want to share?
Yeah, so I just put my hand up, they would copy, and then that would be them to look at me and be silent. One of the schools that I was in, we clapped. So you would clap, you'd do a rhythm, and then they would repeat it and then be quiet. Or just counting down. And then once you got to 1, and I used to get feedback on this all the time when I was training, was once they got to 1, they had to be quiet.
Yeah.
They didn't have any choice in the matter. It was, they had had enough. They'd had enough warning. But yeah, you'll get used to it. And like knowing about like what an acceptable amount of noise is and things like that, you'll get used to it. But most schools here will use commands, and they're just part of it, so they'll pick them up really quick.
For sure, absolutely, Lawrence. And one really important thing in China for commands is making sure your command is explained properly. So let's have a little go at trying a few commands and explaining our commands beforehand as well. So let's just use the 2 that I mentioned earlier as a little example. I'll head first, see how well I can do. But you're going to be my class, and I'm just going to give you a little explanation, as simple as I can, because it's harder to make it simpler as well. As simple as I can. God, I've not done this in years. To see if you can obey it and understand it. And then I'll ask you guys as well to have a go at this. So, okay, guys. Now, when I say magic V, you see my arms? They're like a big V, a big V, a big V. This is my magic V. And when I say magic V, you say, look at me. When I say magic V, you say, look at me. And when you say, look at me, you sit up and straight. Magic V, look at me. Magic V, look at me. Let's practice together. I say magic V, you say, look at me. Let's practice together. Are we ready? Let's unmute our microphones. Here we go. Magic V.
Look at me.
At me.
Look at me.
Ah, very good. Well done. But when you say, look at me, I want to see you sitting upright with your arms crossed on your desk. Look at me. You try again. Look at me. One more time. Here we go. Magic V.
Look at me.
Look at me.
Awesome. Okay, Ben, do you want to have a go at giving us a magic V explanation and trying that out?
Oh, give the explanation.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. When I say magic V and go like that, my arms are in a big V shape. When I say magic V, you say, look at me. And you sit up with your arms crossed and your back straight. So when I say magic V, you say, look at me and sit up and cross your arms with your back straight. Magic V.
Look at me.
Look at me.
Very nice. Awesome, Ben. I really like the body language there. One good thing is to be as big as you can with the body language. Be super, super big and be really exaggerated with it as well. So when you're sitting up, like really, really sit up so it's memorable and it shows for them as well. So body language is super important in that explanation. That's great. Thank you, Ben. So Lawrence, can you do for me your best counting down and explaining when you get down to 1 that we're going to be in super trouble if we're still talking?
This is strange. Okay. So I will count down from 5 to 1, and once I get to 1, you need to be silent. Okay. So we will practice. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And again, you all need to make some noise.
People don't like this one. 老师，我不知道。老师，老师，老师，
1.
老师，我不知道。
Thank you. And it's important to give them a little gap,
Definitely.
just so they can catch up. That's what I would do anyway.
Lawrence, can we practice something just quickly? So when you give us the countdown, Kaylee, I want you to be a particularly naughty child who doesn't stop when Lawrence gets down to 1. And we'll see Lawrence, let's say this is your first lesson. How will you not make an example, but explain using the child who is still talking after 1 that they should not be doing that? Maybe she doesn't fully understand. Maybe she's just a little bit boisterous. Let's have a look. Are we good to try that out, Lawrence?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready, Kaylee?
Okay, so when he counts down, I'm just going to keep talking and keep
Yeah,
doing whatever
just
I'm
keep
doing
talking.
after
Yeah.
you've finished.
Yeah, just doing
Okay.
whatever you were doing before.
Okay.
I
I was at lunch with my friend.
Interesting.
1.
Hear the story. So like I was saying, I
Kaylee.
was having lunch. I was really,
Kaylee,
really
thank you. When I get to 1, what do you need to be?
quiet.
Thank you.
Very good. Excellent.
It's like being back at school.
I really like, Lawrence, that you went to her as well and said, what do you need to be doing? So again, that's interacting, making that connection with the individual student. In China, what you'll get, and this is something a little bit different maybe from the UK, although it might be the same, is when you say, what do you need to do? You'll have 40 other kids going, be quiet, Kaylee! Kaylee's a boo-haw! And you need to make sure, you need to control that. And again, sort of, keep it so the kid doesn't feel that they're being picked on. but also that the message gets through. And that's really nice. I really like that. Kaylee, can you do a magic V for us?
Yes, I can. Okay, so when I say magic V, you have to look at me and cross your arms straight with your back. Cross your arms with your back straight. So I'm going to show you my magic V. Magic V. What do you say? Look at me. Cross your arms with your back straight. Ta-da! So magic V.
Look at me.
Look at me.
Come again, magic V. What do we do after this? Magic V.
Magic V.
Look at me.
Magic
Look at
V.
me.
Okay, then what? Then you look at me.
Ah.
Oh, this is not going well.
No, you're doing excellent, but this is just a little challenge that you might have. And remember, just push forward with it. So, and use your body language. So you say, a really good thing to do is do your turn, my turn with your body language. You say, look at me and look at me. And again, sort of using that. I really like how you're doing that with that. But again, just make sure that that focus is on there for it. So we try again.
Okay.
Give it another go.
Okay, so when I say magic V, you say, look at me. So when I say magic V, you say, look at me with your arms crossed and your back straight. So magic V.
Look at me.
Yeah, great job, great job.
Magic V.
Look, you say, look at me.
Look at me.
Good.
Look at me.
Well, I think you've got an excellent acting there as well as a Chinese student.
Yes, I had no idea.
This is just exactly what happened to me when I taught my first public school class. There was one little boy, I kept trying to do magic V with him, and he kept just going, huh? It was like,
I'm not going to use that one specifically for this.
And what you did was right, and that's not what I did. What I did was I left that little boy to continue just doing that, and it took me about 3 months to regain my first step on level of being able to teach that little boy again. What you did was considerably better, and you built that relationship instantly. So that's fantastic. George has popped out. Joe. Joe,
so
can
my
you hear us
webcam's
okay?
my webcam's screwed for some reason. Don't know why.
No worries, Joe. No problem. We can still hear you all right.
Could just shout. So just 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then they just.
That's the one. So do you want to give us a quick explain how that's going to work for us, and then give us that and make sure we do it?
All right. So when I count down from 5, you have to be quiet by the end. So 5, 4. 3, 1.
Just decided to.
1.
Cool. Now let's try when we're not quiet, and this time everyone isn't quiet.
Okay. So 5. One. Now keep going now.
So when we get to 1, it's tough when they're still going, because we're thinking, I've got this structured, I've got this organized. What do I do? How do I know they're going to do it? The point is to lay down the law early on with your class, so you don't have to do it continually afterwards. A lot of teachers are very afraid of being too harsh or being too loud or something in their first week with their classes, because they're worried their class won't like them, or they're worried their class will be scared of them or upset by them.
I think it just means it hasn't been confirmed yet.
But as in China, because there's so many students there, if you do that for the first week, it'll kind of continue and haunt you. So if in your first session, they're not quiet by 1, you don't need to shout, but we can maybe be a little bit louder. and we can express that point again. So we can maybe say, when I get to 1, everybody is quiet, okay? And when we say a word, we maybe just project our voice a little more when we're explaining this, just so they've got a little bit of an idea that we can be loud. So I'll give it a little try. So if you guys all make noise when I get down to 1, and then I'll show you what we can maybe do in our first week or in our first couple of lessons. Don't be afraid to do this, because otherwise you'll end up shouting a lot more later on. Okay, everyone, when I reach 1, everybody is quiet. Everybody closes their mouth when I reach 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you guys keep talking.
Nino, Nino, Nino. Woo, woo, woo.
At 1. Thank you. That way, early on, they know that teacher will be loud when they are not quiet at 1. If they are a class that does not go along with the rules straight away, then they might be a class that might cause you to shout a lot more if you don't do a little shout in your first week. Just when it comes to the call signs. So remember, be loud in the first instance with it, but don't shout all the time, because you'll just lose control of the class if you shout all the time. But when you are setting these rules, if these rules are disobeyed instantly, then make sure they know that they shouldn't be disobeying them instantly, and then they won't disobey them again in the future. Again, energy, full of life, full of happiness and joy in your class, but they know you can be tough when you need to be tough. And sometimes that's the best way for them for students to understand these things within China. What I'm just going to do now is just give you guys a quick 5-minute break, just away from the screen, because being in front of a screen is horrible all the time. And then we will kick on with the rest of our session, if you guys are good with that. Great. So if we just meet back at 4:15. Terrific. Hi guys, we all back? Not just yet. Hi Ben. Hi Lawrence. Just give me a couple of seconds. We crack on again. Cool. Okie dokes. Let's get back to it then. So, let's move on now to making friends. This is actually going to be super important when you're going to be at public schools in China. A big difference between being at a public school and a private language center is that at public schools, you are going to have less foreigners around you on a day-to-day basis in terms of your actual workplace. There'll be plenty of foreigners who'll be working for the broader agencies that you're working alongside, but at your individual school, you're likely going to be either the only foreign teacher at that school or one of only one or two. Now, some much larger public schools in China or public schools in China in incredibly affluent districts might have as many as 7 or 8 foreign teachers working at each school. But in all likelihood, you're either going to be the only one or there might just be one other one there. So this is a really good opportunity for you to be able to make friends with your Chinese colleagues and people who are there as well. When you first arrive at the school, everyone is going to be super friendly and welcoming to you, to almost a scary degree. Some of you might have banners that might be unfurled with your name at the gate saying, "Welcome to our school, Lawrence," or "Welcome to our school, Ben." Some of you might not quite have that much pomp and ceremony, but you almost certainly will have teachers and students sort of line up to come and meet you and come and say hello to you and greet you and give you nice presents and gifts and things when you arrive, or at the very least kind of just help you out when you get there as itself. It does vary in terms of quite how ostentatious the welcomings can be. But do be slightly prepared for some larger ones. Chances are one of you is going to get a banner. It's really important to make sure you start off on the right foot. So at your school, colleagues, teachers, and head teachers and things, they'll probably give you a gift, like a small gift, welcoming you to the school. Again, I say small gift. Some of you might get sort of just little Chinese trinkets for things. Some of you might get some really expensive looking vase that are particularly joyous head teacher has given you for coming to their school. But maybe think about bringing something bringing sort of like a little bag of small gifts. They can be key rings or something that usually is best to kind of symbolize where you're from, or sort of like part of your culture, or something that's kind of like close to you. So I'm from Portsmouth. So I bought a few little figurines of like the HMS Victory that I gave to like the head teacher and people like that. I told them the little story behind that. And they really quite like that. There's sort of like this kind of sentimentality and meaning behind a gift that's very important in China. And if you can do that, that can really help to, again, sort of ingratiate yourself among your colleagues, and particularly the head teachers or senior people at the school. It's really important to remember to show the head teacher and senior members of staff and older staff a very high level of respect and appreciation. I always put, especially cleaning ladies, like they run the places, like they're the real bosses. You'll sort of see them going around kind of like cleaning everything and being quite fierce looking a lot of the time. You often call a cleaning lady like ai, which is an affectionate term for them. If the cleaning lady finishes cleaning inside your classroom, things sort of like thank you, saying like 谢谢阿姨, 谢谢阿姨, 谢谢阿姨. Always saying hello to the cleaning ladies, saying hello to everyone, but being particularly friendly to people who are older and people who are more senior. a big smile on your face goes a very long way in China, especially as a foreign teacher. It's sort of like symbolize to them. They'll feel, the foreign teacher is enjoying being at my school and smiling. I like this foreign teacher. I'm gonna make their life very nice. So always having a lovely big smile when you're speaking with people, but especially senior members of staff, and remembering to kind of keep up a joyous demeanor even when you're feeling like, oh, there's a bit of a pain today. You know, if you're feeling just like something's been a bit of a pain, wear it on your face when you're in the staff room with all your other colleagues who are feeling it as a pain, as opposed to in the outside bit. It can be a little bit, kind of like teeth and tits when you're outside, being a little more joyous. And you'll generally find that life goes a lot easier with that. And you'll find that if there ever is a problem, people like the head teachers and senior members of staff, they'll come out in your corner if you ever have any problems, if you exhibit a really, really positive and happy attitude day to day. This is, again, something that not a lot of people will tell you in training, but genuinely does help. The teachers who tend to not do so well are teachers who, even if they're not unhappy, will be a bit gloomy day to day and be gloomy around the school building. Chinese will put a lot of emphasis on expression. They're very expressive people. You very often know if someone in China is happy or unhappy quite easily. And also because of the language differences and cultural differences, it's important to make sure that you very clearly express how you feel on your face, especially in a larger area like that. As part of that, that goes nicely into expectations for teachers in China. First of all, there are the practical expectations. So 40 minutes in length, as I've already said. And you're going to be expected to strictly cover what's in the curriculum, what's being taught by the Chinese teachers that they need to catch up with. You can have a lot of freedom in terms of how and where and when you can use things and examples of how you can use certain items, but make sure that you cover and review what has been taught in their curriculum that they have. That's really important. This can be frustrating if you or the Chinese teacher feels that the class is moving too slowly. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, make sure you don't push them to go too fast, because that is a big thing. Make sure they move at a good pace, and make sure you communicate pacing with their Chinese teacher as well. So try to, in your first few weeks, watch as many lessons as they have with their Chinese teachers as possible. And after that, try to watch, you know, at least a couple every month, so you can see what their progress is like in that class as well. It's also incredibly important to be well rested, to get enough sleep, to have to sleep and to nap during the day as well in between things, and keep yourself very well fed. Again, this is a bit of a difference to private school lessons, where although you shouldn't, teachers can get away a lot easier in a private language school by sort of rolling up on 5 hours sleep and then doing their plug and play curriculum. You're going to need all the energy you can get. And you are going to have a microphone, but you're going to need to really project your voice. You're going to need to find your loud voice when you're working with classes in China. And kind of practicing that is something that's a bit of a skill. So doing vocal exercises in the morning can be a really, really handy thing, going online and looking at vocal exercises, because you lose your voice throughout the day so easily. You'll find in your first week of teaching, you'll have lost your voice. Everyone will have lost their voice. So doing vocal exercises to keep, to practice being able to project your voice in a loud enough and constant enough way is super important. So this is one of our teachers beginning one of his classes, and how he works to keep them interested, motivated, and how he loudly does that as well.
Swing, jump, clap your hands, hands up, sit down, stand up, pop, very good, jump, run, fly. Sing a song. Yeah. Okay. Sit down. Sit down. Very good. Okay. Sing a song. One, stop. 1, 2, ready, go. Was it? Touch the ground. Go upstairs. Say your prayer. Say good night. Good night. Turn off the light. Turn out the light. Very good. One more time. 1, 2, ready, go. Turn around. Go upstairs. Very good. Turn up the light. Wow. Very good. Do 5. Yeah. 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 Okay.
So, yeah, that's nice and easy, yeah? Now, that when I watch teachers who are like that and they do it like that, it makes me so angry, because they make it look so easy to get a class of 6 or 7-year-olds perfectly singing and remembering their song, learning new bits of it, and doing everything and encouraging you to get them to get the answers right and correcting you when you get it wrong. In most cases, when you're practicing songs and doing things for the first time, you're going to have a quarter of your class running around in circles, another quarter of the class going, and another quarter of the class doing it all correctly, and the final quarter of the class sort of just generally making noise and punching each other and getting overexcited. Don't worry. No one is ever going to be perfect at doing these things all at once. But what a lot of this stuff comes from is having that structure that I spoke about earlier, having the energy that you're going to need to be able to carry it off, that teachers like that definitely have. But also picking your own flavors for your class, picking your own ideas and your own things. Just copying another teacher is never going to be enough, because you're never going to have a genuine passion or interest for it. So with your classes, pick your own songs and flavors. Every teacher is different. Try to find your own songs and warm-up activities that you enjoy as well as your kids. Don't force something on them that they don't want. I remember I did a song with a class of kids that one of my colleagues had told me worked really well with this class, and they just didn't really like the song, and they'd just be like, oh, I don't like the song. I just kept trying to push forward with the song and get them to learn it every week, and it never worked. And I kept doing it because I was just like, oh, but this teacher's senior to me and he was doing it. It's like, you know, and he ended up saying to me, yeah, just because I do that song doesn't mean, like, obviously don't do it if the class don't like it. And I was like, oh God, no. So, you know, thinking about the own flavors, what your class likes, getting to know them, and it'll come as you go along whilst you teach. Make sure that you give special tasks and treats that are unique to yourself as a teacher as well. So whether that's replacing stars on the board with something more creative. I know that there are teachers who would print out and laminate like really funky little animals that they would stick on the board instead of the stars, and all the kids really liked that because it was different and it was sort of like a bit of a treat. Or like differentiate yourself in lots of other ways. There are all kinds of ways that you can grow into this. You don't ever have to follow an exact rule that's being taught by other people. Feel confident in kind of changing things up when you feel confident to be able to do so. Make sure you have your own props as well. Things like puppets, soft animals, things that can illustrate stories and illustrate what you're trying to put across. Again, these are things that are really going to keep a class's attention and set you out. And your job is going to be as vibrant. Your job really is to be the vibrant and fun teacher that they have at school. Your lessons are like the funnest part of their school life. So make sure it remains that way. So again, you know, have that structure, have that discipline at the very beginning, but use these props, use these things that set yourself apart, and make sure that you interact with the kids, that they enjoy themselves, that you give lots of high fives, and that you give tons and tons and tons of positive reinforcement. Because Chinese kids don't get lots of positive reinforcement, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. They have a lot of pressure from a very early age. So giving lots of positive reinforcement, especially when it comes to speaking and practicing English, is really important. Outside of class, you are, of course, going to be expected to plan and prepare your lessons. You'll have access to a staff room where you'll have desk space. This is all staff rooms in China look the same. They're all very, very bare, very clinical looking. And you'll always just have a space for your laptop to do the work that you need to do. Many schools are flexible about the in-school hours that you need to actually be in school for. So especially if your schools are in city centres, it can be quite a nice time to sort of head out and do something, or you can head back to your apartment, have a nap. You can stay in the staff room, learn Chinese, but always be mindful of the fact that the Chinese teachers don't have the same privileges that you do to be able to leave as well. So thinking, you know, okay, how can I use some of my free time to give them a hand sometimes, or, you know, how can I use this time that I have to be able to contribute something as well. course, you don't have to, but it does always help in terms of your stature in school and actually your general well-being and enjoyment of your time in China, to think about those things too. In terms of additional activities that there are on top of your time teaching in a classroom, there will be showcases and shows. There's nothing Chinese schools love more than putting on a big show for all the parents to come and watch and see. And there will almost certainly be an English song that all the kids will have to sing that you will be in charge of. It's the same for everyone. Everyone's always got a class that has to sing an English song, and 9 out of 10 times it's Let It Go from Frozen. Sometimes it's not. But it's doing things like this are really, really fun, and it'll become a big part of your job to engage in these kinds of activities. Teaching students these English language songs, engaging in these activities, doing these bits and pieces after school, usually sort of around or towards Chinese New Year or Golden Week, is a good idea. And very often teachers will perform in showcases and shows as well. The students will do things and then the teachers will do them. So you're not always obligated to have to do this, but it's always fun to volunteer to do things with Chinese teachers as well. They can teach you Chinese songs and sort of Chinese folk dances and stuff, and to join in with stuff like that, it's a really, really great bonding opportunity to do. They won't always necessarily ask you to do it as well, because they might be a bit shy. So kind of like saying to them, oh, I'd really like to do this. I'd be really happy and really want you to do it. But bear in mind always, it's always very good humoured. You can get away with a lot. You never have to do anything perfectly. But it can feel intimidating, but always remember that it's always in good humour. The amount of, I think I did, when I was in China, I did about 20 different showcases over the period of time where I was there, and 18 of them were crap. They were really bad. Like, you know, and I know I shouldn't say that about children's performances, but like, oh, they were bad, you know, like objectively poor. I didn't do a good job. And but the parents loved it because they saw their kids playing and, you know, having fun and doing these things. And, you know, I enjoyed it as well. And it's sort of just remembering that when you're doing things like these showcases, that a lot of it is fun, and you don't need to feel too intimidated by it. I'm just going to open things out to a few questions. I'd just like a few people to say any ideas that you might have. What expectations do you think there might be for foreign teachers in China? What sort of expectations do you think Chinese staff might have on foreign teachers? If you want to clock off your mutes on your microphones and just shout out.
Organised.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Being organised, being well organised, having your lessons planned well in advance, having like knowledge of how the PPT in the classroom works. You're right, Ben. And a good way to be organised is in your first week, even before your classes begin, going into your classroom, looking at how everything is set up, practicing with your like PPT smartboard, because they work really differently to in the UK and they can be super intimidating to use. So getting some good practice with things like that is really, really important, because the biggest points where you come across as being like, feeling like you look really disorganized is when you come in for the first lesson and you get lost on your way to your classroom around the maze of the giant school, and then you can't activate your PowerPoint and you can't do any of that. So familiarizing yourself in your first week and in your training week with your surroundings and making sure that's done is a really key point to organization, as well as having your lessons planned well in advance. Any other expectations that you guys think might be super important?
Being punctual.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Lawrence.
Being punctual.
Yeah, really good point again, being punctual. Being punctual is very important. First of all, in terms of how it looks, but also in terms of the issues that will arise if you are not punctual with your classes. If you want a class of 60 students to descend into chaos, then the best way to do it is for them not to have a teacher at the beginning of the lesson, and you'll find yourself climbing your way all the way back to the point you should be at the beginning if you're late to it, if you are not in your class before your students are. Being punctual in China can sometimes be tricky too, because sometimes a meeting might overrun and the head teacher or senior member of staff won't have ended it, and you'll all be stuck there really wanting to leave, but you can't. So again, knowing the fastest way to your class, being familiar with your surroundings and being able to get in as quickly as possible is super important. And also being, aware if you're outside of school, how long it'll take you to get back. Any other key expectations?
Being adaptable.
Yeah, definitely being adaptable. That's really true. Being able to conduct a class where you are being quite strict and structured with them, to immediately going into a position where you are playing with them, offering tons of positive reinforcement, and doing loads of fun things with them before finishing your class, then going into a meeting and then discussing how you're going to put on some sort of extravaganza where all the kids are dressed as Smurfs, and you have to organize them into a 30-minute play in order to do that just after you finish doing all of this stressful stuff. Yes, it is very, very important that you are adaptable, because you are going to be wearing lots of hats in this job and lots of different things, and you've got to be flexible and adaptable for it. Definitely, Joe. Any other ones that we reckon? Does the little dog have any ideas?
Really good to be able to communicate effectively. Probably that'd be primarily, I feel like the biggest thing that you'd have a problem with is just communicating. There's probably going to be a bunch of people that you're going to have to communicate to. It's not just like report to one person. It's immersing yourself in a whole new community, a new work life, like everything. Just, yeah, adaptability and communication is, I feel like, the biggest.
That's absolutely right. Adaptability and communication, being clear, being simple with your instructions. It's lovely. Having those clear instructions, clear communication is very important. Try not to explain things in too much of a long roundabout way. Try to use simple call codes and connections with students, because again, just remembering it's their second language. Fantastic. So, common challenges in the classroom. Biggest one is disruption. Absolutely the most common thing. It comes from the fact that you've got large classes, you've got young, energetic students doing activities which are a lot more high energy than they're used to. When you're engaging them in conversation classes, songs, games, it's a recipe for disaster. You got to be ready to deal with it. Remember your calls and commands, remember your magic bees, remember your counting downs, and remember to do that in your first week in the job. I keep saying it, but this is the most important thing to remember. The first week in your job is critical for getting these things drilled into them. And it'll save you 2 years of building your way back up to the point in which you should have been in the first place, which is what happened to me. And I don't wish it upon anyone. Remember the structure of your lesson. Remember how you've got that working. Remember song, review, activity, reward. This is usually the simplest 4-step process that a lot of people use for it. So having that, again, super important. And setting out those rules at the very beginning. Now, in China, we spoke about flexibility. Flexibility is very, very, very important, not least because you will almost certainly have a lot of last minute and short notice demands. This is very much part and parcel of life in China. China runs very quickly and things can change in an instant in the country. You might be instructed to change lessons or cover a class at the very last moment. If this happens, don't worry about being underprepared. Just give it your best shot and no one is going to shout at you for it. Now, the lesson in itself might not go perfectly or as well as anything else, but if you can create a surrounding of yourself where you're observing Chinese lessons, where you're observing lessons that are being done by other teachers, like I mentioned earlier, you'll find yourself in a much better position for being ready to handle classes when you're asked to cover them for short notice. A teacher might not be there. You might be told, you need to go and teach, you need to go and cover David's class. And then you say to the person who's just asked you to do that, okay, what grade's David teaching? Oh, he's teaching grade 5. Oh, okay, I don't teach any grade 5 classes, so I don't know any of the lessons. What are they learning at the moment? Oh, I don't know. Oh, okay, can you maybe just quickly find out what they're learning for me, or what the teacher last did for them? Oh yeah, of course. Ask and tell, because they won't do it for you instantly. Again, China doesn't quite work that way. You've got to get the information out of people quite quickly. And as long as you have a baseline of information, you've got some songs that you already use, and and you can give it a go with things like short notice cover classes. No one's going to be cross at you. You're just covering a class. Unless a request like this is, particularly unfair or goes against something that you need to do, then I'd always say give it a go. It's a surefire way to make yourself popular, and you're giving them more than they would get otherwise with just not having anything to learn. And trust me, you will be rewarded for stepping up to these challenges, whether that's with nice trips to places or nice meals that they'll take you for, or just generally giving you the afternoon off, or just generally making your life good. It's always a good idea to go ahead and do that. Parents, now luckily for you guys, you don't have to worry quite so much about this as private language centre teachers do. Private language centre teachers have to deal with these guys after every single lesson with every single individual student. Parents in China are very demanding of their children from a very early age, and that can make you feel a little bit of pressure. Now, at public schools in China, you might find that Chinese English teachers might request you to send sort of like voice recordings of pronunciations of particular words, or like little videos of you reading books, to parents who want to practice with their students after school, or to them over WeChat or something, so they can send on to their parents. Try to keep yourself at least 1 degree of separation away from being directly connected to the parents. So if the Chinese teachers want you to do that, be like, oh, can I send it to you? And then you can send it to them. Just because you can find yourself, you can find yourself with the best of intentions being like, oh, I'll share my WeChat information with this Chinese parent who wants to learn more. And then suddenly they're like, what is this? 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 Why is my son not good at English? I don't understand this. Yeah. Keep a degree of separation. You have the luxury of doing it at a public school, so always keep that luxury. And if you're asked to do this work within your work hours, always do it. Outside of your work hours, you don't have to, but it can be a nice thing to do. But you've got plenty of free work hours that you can do this stuff in, and again, it helps. But yeah, always remember, keep a degree of separation between you and the parents. And then you have children with individual behavior problems, or you have the challenge of differentiated learning, which is to say using different techniques for different children in a culture where everyone is taught via rote, and where you have very large class sizes and very little emphasis on individuality and expression. Now, there are a few basic things for this within large class sizes. Ensure that the children who you kind of see as being a bit naughty are sat closest to you and apart from one another. Very often in schools in China, the Chinese teachers will actually put these kids at the back and keep them away from all the other kids, because there's a little bit more of a kind of Darwinian attitude towards learning, and a kind of attitude that can sometimes be a bit like, well, that kid's going to ruin the experience for all the other kids, so just shove him away. That's not going to help with your classes when you're teaching these classes. First of all, from a point of view of, you want every kid to be able to learn, but secondly, your classes are going to be quite high energy sometimes, lots of songs being sung and lots of activities like that being done. You want to keep those kids in your view and within your orbit. Speak to colleagues and other senior members of staff if there are students that you're particularly struggling with, and about their experiences of dealing with them as well. The experiences from staff members of particular children who have maybe been with them for several years will be really valuable for you. And always remember to ask, because you're not always going to be told about things like this. In China, the impetus is often on the child and not the teacher when it comes to learning, particularly from the parents. So you can have students who might be very, very quiet because they are very scared of getting something wrong. So making sure, again, those students are in your orbit is very important. And making sure that when you are splitting them into groups and doing group work, that you can have a quiet child or a naughty child get a star or get a sticker for their group in every lesson in order to build up their self-esteem, their sense of worth in the class. But very importantly in China as well, the appreciation from their peers for students who are going to want to work with them. Students can sometimes look to almost sort of cut off the dead weight, as they see it, in a very harsh way, of students that they think are bad or ill-behaved or naughty. And they may even be encouraged to do that by their parents. So making sure these children are brought into these activities, making sure they have the chance to answer questions and get rewards and be engaged is incredibly important, because otherwise they can be disruptive to your class, and also they can just simply find it very hard to learn. So what are the toughest challenges that you guys think you are going to face in a classroom in China? Again, if you guys want to unmute yourselves and let me know, what do you feel your toughest challenge thinking about all these things is going to be personally for you in China in the classroom?
I think sort of coming up with effective and engaging lesson plans that are the right sort of level for the children. I think an enormous amount of effort and thought will have to go into that to make sure they're really effective.
That's absolutely right. In your training week, you'll be given information on planning lessons, but what's really good as well to do is to speak with senior teachers in your organization and ask if you can have like burnt onto a USB stick a bunch of their lessons that they've taught before. So you can get inspiration from those lessons. You can use them, modify them in different ways as well. They might not always necessarily be the exact same lesson as the one you are going to teach in terms of exact content, but you can glean ideas about structure from it with that and try and tailor it to yourself. So remember, always ask senior teachers if they can share with you, like, you know, their library of PPTs and lessons that they've done, so you can, you know, modify and try things out, and go to different teachers as well to find styles that you particularly like.
I think one thing that I'm gonna probably be struggling with, not struggle with, but probably just the cultural differences. Like even in the classroom, like I'm very open to like mistakes are okay. Like I want to see you learning, like things like that. And like if they're scared to really talk or like make a mistake, I can see how that would make me feel like I would just feel bad about it. You know what I mean? Like I would try and help, and obviously, but that would be a challenge that I would obviously have to get used to. Just that they're just timid, you know, fear of failure.
Definitely, you're absolutely right. And you know, it can be tempting, particularly in your first couple of weeks, to really engage very strongly with the kids that really impress you. So you're going to be very impressed by, you know, 5 or 6 kids in every class that you have. And you'll be like, oh, this kid's amazing, they're great. And you'll want to interact more with them and, you know, try more things with them. But these kids don't really need your help that much. It's again, in those first few weeks, giving the prompts and the help to those kids that are struggling a little bit more, and maybe partnering them with the kids that do better as well, to make sure that they feel more confident in speaking and coming out of their shells. And yeah, no, absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's a challenge, but again, not falling into those first few weeks traps, which can be, you know, where your class ends up going can be decided in those first couple of weeks or even days, when you're deciding you know, who you're calling on for questions, and also how you're phrasing questions. You know, think about when you're teaching, you can take note in your class of the abilities of each of these students, prepare questions and set them, these questions from very easy to very hard of how you ask them. Obviously don't let the kids see. The very easy questions, always have more of them, and always give those very easy questions to the kids that struggle more, and that you know can answer them in the first instance, because improving that confidence immediately or as fast as you can is going to be important, and doing it on an ongoing basis important as well. And then, you know, you go all the way up to the very hard questions where you have many fewer, that you go to the kids who, you know, are always talking anyway and coming up with answers anyway and contributing enough anyway for them to answer. Anyone else got any particular challenges that they feel they might find tough?
Probably having a 40-minute lesson.
Yeah,
that's a lot shorter than we would have here. And I think that will be a major challenge.
Yeah, you will. That's a really good point. And it can be tough squeezing everything into 40 minutes. It can be really tough squeezing it into 40 minutes. A key to that is having that structure of your lesson pinned down. So like 5 minutes opening and song, 5 minutes ending and song, 10 minutes review of your last lesson, activity 1, 10 minutes, activity 2, 10 minutes, and really having that structure that you always use nailed down, pinned down. I would actually genuinely use my stopwatch for my first couple of months when I was working in a public school. I'd actually use the alarm after 5 minutes that would go off. So I would know when to wrap it up really quickly. So I'd just get carried away with songs and like stuff like that, and then just end up realizing, oh God, 40 minutes has passed now. I've literally done nothing that I need to do. So again, timing things, having that structure in place and using that structure all the time. Great. I think let's take another quick 5-minute break. If we all just pop back in about, let's say 5:05, and then we'll just go on to our final section. Okay. You guys a couple of minutes. Oh, okay. Great. Okie dokie. Well, let's crack on. And go on to what to expect outside of class. First of all, there's the environment. Schools in China are basically enormous compounds. They take up a very, very large surface area and a huge area within the city in which they're based. In China, you'll see that giant apartment blocks are absolutely everywhere. People live up and space is very much at a premium. This gives you an indication as to how much people invest in education in China. The biggest, most valuable thing in urban environments in China is space. And schools take up more space than anything else in cities that you'll go to. They have space for students to be able to exercise, large classrooms, large auditoriums, large breakout rooms and kind of special schools that they have. Many schools that you'll go to will have their own little mini initiatives, their own little things that they have to set themselves apart. And usually these are portrayed through specialized classrooms. For instance, some schools have specialized history classrooms, where there is essentially a classroom that is a museum. And in this classroom, they have old Chinese artifacts, fans, and they're actually laid out in museum-like cases around the class. Students can interact with them. There's other ones where there's a Confucius classroom, where all the other classrooms are modern classrooms, and then there's this one classroom where they have giant bamboo chairs and a giant bamboo throne where the teacher sits and teaches the students in the old-fashioned Confucian way of actually learning. There are classrooms which specialize in things like technology, robotics. Again, those of you who are going to Shenzhen, there's a lot of like tech classrooms where there are things like that. There are like 3D printer classrooms and stuff, but a lot of individual schools will have their own individual thing for this. Another big one is pottery. There are quite a lot of pottery classrooms that are popping up all over the place at the moment, which are quite cool. Most schools will have their own very large playing grounds and track and fields, which are used for sports as well as other just recreational areas. Students generally don't tend to use these kinds of areas for sort of like playtime and stuff like that. They'll tend to use them more for functionality, actually. Schools are guarded by security guards at their entrances. And you need to remember to bring an ID that you'll be given to get in and out every day. This can be something that's almost even like intimidating when you see it for the first time. Security guards stand outside the school, the parents wait outside the school for the kids to come out. Security guards have big like catching sticks. They're used to like sort of like keep order just in case. Incredibly safe, but you know, they've always got these big sticks. Don't be intimidated by the big sticks when you see it. This is the hint. Lunchtime and meals. School canteens in China are used by all students for their lunch. Packed lunches don't really exist in China as a thing because eating hot food is very important in Chinese culture. You'll very rarely see Chinese people ever eating food that isn't cooked or hot. They think it's really bad for your health, and they think in Britain we're absolutely crazy for like eating cold sandwiches and stuff like that. For lunch is some of the biggest arguments that I have with Chinese friends, and my partner who's Chinese is about the merits of cold food or eating food for functionality. Most schools will give foreign teachers free lunch and often breakfast and dinner as well. So you can usually get like 3 free meals on your working days. Pretty sweet deal. For breakfast, you got to turn up early enough, but it's usually worth it. The portions are large. Meals are always hot. They're always nutritious. Always give you absolutely everything that you need. They might be a little bit different to what you're used to in terms of the type of food that you get. You might not always necessarily know what your food is, so it's always worth asking. Remember, if you're a vegetarian, to politely decline any meat that the lunch lady might try to pile onto your tray as well. You'll have lots of sections on your tray. So just make sure you don't get the meat if you're a vegetarian. I mentioned earlier after school activities. There's no compulsion for you to join in these, but I do recommend checking some of them out. Again, as I mentioned earlier, all you need to really do is ask, and you can usually get on board with one. I guess that leads me on to another little point of discussion, which is, what do you think that you could possibly contribute outside of class? What do you think you could possibly bring to school, or what might you want to bring to the school that you're going to? Again, anyone, just feel free to chip in. Are there any sort of skills or hobbies or things that you particularly enjoy that you might want to look at bringing into something? Kaylee.
Oh, okay, just targeted.
Oh, sorry,
so,
I thought I saw your your microphone on. Sorry.
It's okay. I coach children's gymnastics, so I know quite a bit of gymnastics, like start to finish, trampoline, floor, beam, bars. I also know yoga, and so I would like to get certified eventually. And I guess kickboxing, but that's about it.
That's a lot of stuff. And, you know, asking to contribute and help with after school activities, or, you know, even once you're there for a little while, if you feel confident setting up your own sort of after school activity clubs and things to do, would be very high in demand, something that'd be quite fun to do as well, definitely. That's great.
I've coached football before, so like I suppose I could always like do a few like coaching sessions and that.
Fantastic. That's a really popular one, George. That's a really, really popular one. Quite a lot of foreign teachers, when they go to public schools, will do like football classes and football activities and stuff. It's a really good idea. Really, really good idea. It's always very popular with the students
there. Back when I was at school, I was always involved in loads of music stuff. So I used to play in some of the school bands and things like that. And I'm just wondering if that's what they do over there as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, sort of doing music classes, bands. They'll always have after school orchestras and music classes and things like that. But also, you know, kind of like guitar and rock bands and things like that as well, that you can look to set up and look to help. Again, it's a matter of asking, and if you ask, you'll almost always be given a route into trying these things out and having a go at them. Music, again, really, really good option. Fantastic. Okay, great. Could you guys just quickly in the chat box, if you guys pop in the city that you're going to, or the city that you think you're going to, or the city that you want to go to, you know, just so I get a little bit of an idea just for this next bit.
Ooh.
Okay. Cool. Okay. No Zhengzhou people here then. That's fine. Okay, cool. So first one, obviously Shenzhen. So Shenzhen is, the reason so many people teach in public schools in Shenzhen is because so many public schools in China want foreign teachers in Shenzhen. There's basically a big citywide initiative to internationalize their education. And as part of that, a lot of foreign teachers live and work in Shenzhen. More foreign teachers work in Shenzhen public schools than in any other city in China, probably than in all other cities in China put together. There are more foreign teachers in Shenzhen public schools. It's a great place to be a teacher in a public school in China. The reason for this is, first of all, the quality of life is very, 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 very good. It's an incredibly modern, high-tech city. In 1979, it was a fishing village of 20,000 people. Today, it is an absolute enormous metropolis of over 12 million. Shenzhen has several different districts, all of which have their own city centres. The city itself is home to some of the funnest attractions and theme parks in China. There's always something to do at the weekend, whether it's going out to Happy Valley theme park, going on the roller coasters, going to a place called SeaWorld, which is essentially, it's not SeaWorld like in America, it's a district called SeaWorld, which is pretty much the kind of foreign town in Shenzhen, where you have a lot of foreign bars, restaurants. There's a big giant yacht that sits in the middle, which is a really nice Chinese restaurant that is very popular with a lot of foreigners to go to. Very classy, very nice place. Shenzhen is incredibly clean and incredibly green. All public transportation in Shenzhen is electric. All the buses are electric, and they are phasing out the last petrol-powered taxis. So the vast majority of taxis in Shenzhen are electric as well, which has created this environment where the roads are very, very quiet, because in Shenzhen, on top of that, because it's built for electric cars, essentially, there's electric power points everywhere, you very rarely hear a combustion engine on the streets of Shenzhen. You just often hear going by you. As it is such a new city, it's purpose-built for a lot of people as well. It's very wide roads and very wide pedestrian sidewalks. There's a lot of greenery around the city, a lot of plant life. They live year-round because you will only ever go about as low as 24 degrees Celsius, as being the absolute lowest that you'll ever get in terms of temperature in Shenzhen year-round. And even then, that's pretty rare. It can get muggy and it can get pretty humid in the summer, and you will have typhoons, which are scary and fun. You will have at least 1 or 2 days of school that will be cancelled, probably each September, because of typhoons when they come, and you'll need to stay at home. But they usually last and blow over pretty quickly. And you also have in Shenzhen a very affordable style of living compared to the other two comparable first-tier cities in Beijing and Shanghai. Whereas in Beijing and Shanghai, the cost of living will go up more. Shenzhen's cost of living for things such as food, for things such as rent, really, to be honest, although rent is certainly more than in second-tier cities in China, it's nowhere near that, Beijing and Shanghai. These things are all comparatively low. So Shenzhen is one of those cities where you kind of have the benefits of living in a first-tier city for the cost of living in a second. Of course, in Shenzhen too, you're just across the border from Hong Kong, which is a great place to visit and see. Shenzhen is also an absolute hub for technology. There is the world's largest electronics market there, in the North Square technology market. You can excuse me, you can get literally anything you want there, and you can bargain anything you want down to a really low price. I've got about 20 little drones that I bought. I've still not like really used them all. Don't really quite know why I have 20 of them, but I got them like for a really good price. It's a really, really good place to buy gifts for people as well, because you always get really funky stuff. Shenzhen is awesome. Living space in Shenzhen is small though. Apartments will be, if you get your own apartment, it'll be like a studio apartment, very, very little. Living space is at a premium. But getting around Shenzhen is easy. It's got a great public transportation system, great network of buses. The metro system is very new, very modern, and can get you around pretty much anywhere you want to go. You've also got really good rail links from Shenzhen. You can get from Shenzhen to Shanghai in less than 6 hours on the bullet train, as well as nearby interesting cities like Guangzhou and Dongguan, which are a little more historic than Shenzhen, if you want to see more traditional China. Now, some of you might know that in the south of China, people don't speak Mandarin so much as a norm. They speak more Guangdonghua or Cantonese. Now, conventional logic would make you think that in Shenzhen, people speak Cantonese casually as opposed to Mandarin. But that is very wrong, because in Shenzhen, there's a saying that no one comes from Shenzhen. Everyone comes from everywhere else in China. So Shenzhen has this very unique position in Guangdong province of being a city right in the south of Guangdong province where they don't speak Cantonese, they speak Mandarin. So it's a really good place to learn Mandarin Chinese as well, because people will all speak a standard Chinese to one another, because the Chinese will all speak standard Putonghua, Mandarin to each other, and they won't use their own dialects. So it's a great place to actually learn pure Chinese as well, because of that. Speaking of which, where pure Chinese comes from, Beijing. So Beijing, the political, cultural, and for the most part, historical capital of China. It is a absolutely dizzying, busy, crazy city. I don't think there's any city on earth that's quite like it. It's a city where you can go from the Forbidden Palace, dead in the middle, to the CCTV tower and just see how far China has come and just realize how much civilization there has been over the last 5,000 years in that country. If you want to get an idea of real China, of its history, of its ancient history, there are a few better places to go than Beijing for that. Beijing is also, being the political capital, somewhat of a prestige city. It's a bit of a kind of, if you make it here, then you've made it anywhere in China. The closer you get to the source of power in China, generally, the more prestige a city or a place has. And in Beijing, you feel that. Beijing also is home to two of China's best universities, in Beida, Peking University, and Tsinghua University. And it's home to a lot of academics and a lot of thinkers. People in Beijing are very often much more opinionated than in other areas of China. Whereas speaking with Chinese friends and colleagues in a lot of cities and a lot of places, they often won't have too many opinions on things like politics or history or whatever. In Beijing, it's the opposite. Like, everyone wants to talk about that stuff. They're all like really lively, really energetically involved, and like to interact with that sort of thing, especially taxi drivers. Taxi drivers in Beijing will just talk forever about politics, which pretty much no one else anywhere in China does. It's really interesting. And Beijing as well is, because of a lot of that ways of thinking, it's a bit of a hipster city. It's got quite a cool art scene. There's a district called the 789 district in Beijing, which is home to a lot of art, a lot of modern art, which is really cool, quite interesting. There's a lot of indie music and stand-up comedy scenes in Beijing, and again, it's home to a very large expat population from all kinds of different walks in life. Beijing's a bit of an outlier with that. Whereas in most second-tier cities and even a lot of first-tier cities, most of the expats that you'll meet will most likely be foreign teachers. In Beijing, you'll be people doing all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of very interesting people that you can meet in Beijing. Beijing is very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer. In the winter, you can get to like -20 on some of the worst days. And in the summer, you can easily be nearing 40. It's very dry as well, whereas Shenzhen is very humid. Beijing is very much the opposite. It's very dry. You can actually occasionally get small bits of sand that blow in from the deserts immediately west of it as well, that cause kind of like very mini sandstorms, but they're quite interesting to see because of the dry weather that's there as well. Great markets in Beijing, tons of fantastic markets, food markets. as well as goods markets. It's a really great place to barter and to interact with local people. Yeah, I think that would be my take on Beijing. I won't go through Zhengzhou and Zhangjiagang, as I think we've got all of those down. I think we could probably wrap up after a few final questions now, actually. So does anyone have any final questions just before we finish today?
It was just on that you were talking about Shenzhen, and this actually applies to Beijing as well. In that these are two extremely global, cities. What level of English is spoken there, and how much Chinese would you actually need to know to get by?
Fantastic question. And the answer to that is always a surprisingly low amount of English is spoken. And it's very much an East Asian thing. Although English might be understood, very often people will be too afraid or self-conscious to speak English to you. Now, in terms of learning Chinese, it's always good to have simple phrases that you can use to get by. But in your first few weeks and months, you are going to be very well supported by HR people who are going to be there to help you with things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis. And also, a lot of stuff is done online and via apps that you can use English on as well. However, the best way to go about utilizing Chinese is to practice in the street and practice with people. People are generally very patient with you and will often help out a lot more. In Beijing and Shenzhen, they will speak more English than in second-tier cities, but I would never treat it like going to Europe and thinking this person's likely to speak English. If you go to like a McDonald's or a Subway or like any restaurant, chances are the person behind the counter isn't going to be able to speak English with you. So you'll want to communicate using Chinese in other ways, even if that's just as simple as pointing to what you want, saying Jager, we are Jager at first. And there are people who've lived in China for 4 or 5 years and never got beyond that. But hopefully you'll want to do that. Going out, practicing the phrases that you know already with things is enough to get by initially. You can feed yourself and, kind of like muddle your way through. But as you learn more, make sure you actually put that into practice when you're doing it. Again, a big mistake a lot of people make is to have Chinese lessons, learn it all academically, and then go to a restaurant and go, we are Jager, we are Jager, we are Jager, we are Jager, as opposed to using the vocabulary they've just learned. So as soon as you learn something new, go out and put it into practice.
How do we go about like finding someone to teach us Mandarin lessons? Like, how is it pretty easy? Do you just talk to the people that you work with? What do you recommend?
So you guys are all gonna have free Mandarin lessons. Public school in Shenzhen, yeah, you guys will all have free Mandarin lessons. They'll be done in groups. Now, getting private tutoring is very easy and actually quite cheap. You can usually get a 1 hour session between 50 and 100 kwai. So like about £6 to £11, or about $9 to $10 an hour. For as little as that, you can get private tuition in Mandarin for. That is very easily found. When you get to China and you start meeting expats and friends, you'll very quickly be invited into expat group chats on WeChat. All you need to do, pop a message on a WeChat group and say, need to find a Mandarin teacher, can anyone help me? Within seconds, you'll get about 500 responses from people saying, this person's really good, this person's really good, this person's really good. Asking friends who they might recommend is a good idea as well. But you'll very quickly find that things like getting Mandarin lessons will be very easy, and it's very much a buyer's market in China. Great. Any others just for the moment? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. It's a little more compact than I thought, but that's always good. We can get through a lot quicker, which is nice. I hope you guys all have a lovely evening, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, Kaylee. And I will speak to you all again soon. Take care. Bye now.
Bye.